We are less than a year away from electing or re-electing the President of the United States. We are also just over a year away from the end of President Obama's first, and depending on how things turn out, only term. So as we close out 2011, let's give the nation's most visible employee a performance review. What were Obama's successes? What were his failures? And how has his presidency shaped our country? We answer these questions today on The Professors.
From across the city and the 7 city colleges of Chicago, broadcasting from 63rd and Halsted at Kennedy King College. Professors take the art of conversation to a higher degree.
I'm Pamela Canamaray from Kennedy King College. Joining me today are professors Nick Panamitros from UIC, Harper, and Kennedy King College. C.M. Winters Palacio from Malcolm X College. And Ted Williams from Kennedy King College. Before we begin this episode of Professors, let's watch a student-produced video segment on Obama's first term.
Election night 2008. Chicago's Grant Park was electrified with excitement. There was a feeling that things were really about to change.
Americans who sent a message to the world that we have never been just a collection of individuals or a collection of red states and blue states. We are and always will be the United States of America.
But that excitement quickly wore off when the newly elected president tried pushing his health care reform plan through Congress.
It has now been nearly a century since Theodore Roosevelt first called for health care reform.
Some of the people we surveyed in downtown Chicago felt it was too much too soon.
Healthcare, you know, like I wish he would have just not jammed that down the throat if he wasn't going to jam everything else down the throat, I guess. That's all.
Democrats lost control of Congress in 2010. After that, many of Obama's plans were blocked.
When he had the Democratic Congress, I felt like he could have really put all those ideas through, and he didn't because he was doing this whole bipartisan dream that just didn't come true.
I don't think that he's very effective in getting the Congress to work together. He speaks a lot. He has a lot to say, but I don't know that he follows up on a lot of his actions.
Most of the people we spoke to praised the president's character.
Under the circumstances, he's had a lot to deal with. He's one man, and it's a large country with a large mess to fix, but I like what he stands for. I like his ideals. I like his disposition.
Definitely, I think this is a very good guy, and this is the guy we need for now to repair the damage that was caused in America for the whole decade.
But others expressed their total dislike for the president.
He's not any kind of leader at all. The health care deal, you know, he says he wants Congress to compromise, but he's not. Congress is willing to compromise, but he's not.
He's not doing so good. I'm not going to get into specifics, but he ain't doing so good.
I'm a conservative. Always have been, not in politics, but just in general I am. And it just doesn't match up with my core beliefs.
Despite some negative comments, most approve of the job the president has done so far and plan to vote for him in 2012.
I think that he's had an extremely hard job. I think that he's done a good job. I believe that he has had a lot of obstacles to overcome.
He's doing everything that he can to, you know, just sort of bring this economy back from what it was in the past decade. So, you know, I definitely applaud him for that, and I hope he gets reelected.
Reporting for the Professors on WYCC TV, I'm Larry Prater.
So, we just viewed the video. Who would like to comment on what they just saw?
Sure. I mean, well, I think some of the folks were kind of brutal, you know. I've been on this show for a while. People have heard me talk about Obama. I have disagreements with the president on a few issues. I think overall, given what he's had to face, I think he's actually done a halfway decent job. I have seen very clearly a level of opposition in the Congress that, you know, you could make the case that other presidents face this or whatever, but I'd make the case that on some of his policy proposals, I don't know where else he's supposed to go. And I think that given the economic crisis that we've been in, given the foreign policy crisis that we've been in, and a variety of other issues, I think that I don't know that any president would have done a better job than this. And so I'm a little bit perturbed by some of the folks who give him such a hard grade, but I understand why. I just think that that he's done a decent job so far.
CM?
Well, I just, honestly, there are times when I shake my head in disappointment. I feel that I wish that, considering the circumstances, he could have done far more renegade things. However, one thing for certain is, it's like Michelle Ndegeocello said, he's just not that revolutionary. He's not revolutionary. I think people thought that he would be. I think, or at least maybe I thought that he would be.
No,
but he's just not that revolutionary. In addition to that, I really believe that once he got in that Oval Office, he found out what politics really means in America, what government really means, and I think he may have found out that he really is not running as much as everyone would perceive.
Nick?
Yeah, I think that you know, he had a supermajority in Congress the first 2 years of his term, and he could have been a renegade. But I think that you have to compare apples with apples and oranges with oranges. And what I'm alluding to is the fact that these are very hard times. This nation's going through probably one of its hardest times since the Great Depression, if not as bad in some ways. And he is, I think, trying to find a solution. I'm not necessarily, you know, saying I agree with everything. However, he did have a supermajority, and you know, democracy is 51%. What do you do? Let the 49% just fall off? Yeah. And I think that he was trying to come up with some kind of a solution that perhaps wasn't that entertaining to his party, 100%, and reaching out to the other side. And unfortunately, people see that as a weakness, but I see it as a strength because he's looking out for that other 49%.
Yeah, I think healthcare is a perfect example of that. I mean, literally, you know, initially when we saw these town hall meetings going around the country, people were so upset because the president was talking about a public option. Well, ultimately, the public option was dropped, and he came back with a policy that really was based off of a Republican governor by the name of Mitt Romney. Which, you know, maybe that's the other Mitt Romney, not this Mitt Romney, or two Mitt Romneys as they say it. But, you know, he came up with a plan. And then so, you know, he passes this piece of health care legislation. The country's not been able to do anything on health care for years. He passes this legislation. What does it do? It supports the insurance companies. It puts a mandate. Businesses do very well. And then he gets called a socialist for pushing this plan. I mean, what the heck is the guy supposed to do?
Yeah, I think he can't win for losing. But I really believe that the Republicans have really done a number on him.
Well, do you see him as a second-term president?
I would say, okay,
wow.
Actually, no. It's
well, I
funny.
think that response right there told it all.
No, why I laughed is I thought about the Republican field. That's what made me laugh, actually. Because honestly, I think given the economy, given his low approval rating, his approval rating is 43% now. This is the lowest for a third-year president since Eisenhower. Every president since then has had a higher approval rating. Now, I'm not a big poll guy.
But they talked about the polls even when they're low like that, that they still make a comeback.
Well, no, but the point is that there is this idea, there's angst, and I think that angst has a lot to do with the economy. So, if there were good Republican candidates, I would say it would be a no-brainer. Obama will be gone. But the reality is that this Republican field, they can't get it together. And I think that they're going to lose because of themselves.
So then it does matter who runs against him at this point.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
And last term, I mean, he had a punching bag. He had George Bush, who was great for punching, and you know, you know, the Iraq War issue. You know, people were against the war, hoping that he would stop that or pull out. And of course, being the first African-American president, I think inspired a lot of young people to vote for him. But this time around, he doesn't have those things. But although he does not have those things, the Republicans have yet to show a candidate, I think, that's got his charisma, his personality,
and character.
And his character.
Yeah.
They just don't have it.
So. And I think character is playing a huge part in this election. And I know Tad and I disagree about the role of character in politics, but when you're on the other side and you're at home looking, I much prefer to vote for the guy that I'm not hearing about, who's been tipping out on his wife and doing it. Because to me, it just says, okay, well.
And I agree with you on that, by the way.
Oh, do you?
I do, actually.
Can you roll that again? But I think character does play a huge issue. But I think a lot of times, as you're right, there was the whole phenomena of having our first black president and everyone wanting to say, to me, sometimes politics in America becomes a spectator sport. Nobody wants to vote for a loser.
Sure.
So everybody wanted to be down with the winner. So
okay.
he was good to go.
Well, Americans usually tend to vote, actually go in groves and vote when they want to vote somebody out. And you know,
anger is very anger it motivates.
And so, I mean, right now you don't see that going on, but like I said, the Republicans have somebody they forget.
And I think this myth, and I have to say this is not a very popular thing to say, but I just think that the myth of the first African American president was overblown and overplayed in this past election.
How so?
Because number one, President Obama, if you look at it by all standards, was not this beacon of liberal, revolutionary, let's stick it to the man politics that people on the ground wanted because he's African American. Then number two, the idea that he is the representative of millions of African Americans who've gone through slavery, that sort of thing, that's not his background. And only in America, honestly, would he even be considered completely quote-unquote African American. He's a biracial man. His mother is of European descent, his father's of African descent, and that only in America makes you black, but in the rest of the world it makes you multi-ethnic, multiracial, and so President Obama represented a lot more than the quote-unquote black community, but black people hung their hopes on him. And white people said, oh, look, we've got a black president. And so all of the hopes of America were pinned on him, which I think was very unfair. It's not his background ethnically or the way he grew up geographically, where he grew up. And I think that it was unfair to pin those expectations on him.
Well, let's make a segue because you're absolutely right. I agree with you with that. But what about his foreign policy issues and some of the things he's done there? What do you think about that? Nick or...
Well, he ended the torture on Guantanamo Bay. He got to that, although...
But he wasn't able to close it down.
He wasn't able to close it down, but he was able to do that. However, I still have issues because most people don't realize that our paramilitary can still torture, and they don't have to follow Geneva Convention covenants. But he did get rid of that. He didn't close the Guantanamo Bay. But there's several things.
Yeah, I mean Osama. I mean everyone. I mean that's the elephant in the room. If you look at honestly, now here's the reality. He's had a very hawkish foreign policy. You would look at this, and if you didn't know what was going on, you would think this was the Bush administration in many ways, because he accomplished many of the goals that the Bush administration set out. And one thing that makes me so angry about what's happening with him is that the Republicans don't even give him credit for that.
But that's not his fault if you're saying the Republicans don't give him credit for it.
No, I'm saying yes. I think in foreign policy, he has really pushed this, and I think that he does. I think he should get credit for that in that way. It just shows how partisan this conversation is. Even people have argued, oh, well, you're going to end the war in Iraq. He reduced the troops in Iraq, but if you look at, he expanded the war in Afghanistan.
Ted, though, if you look at the United States historically from after World War II until we took down the Soviet Union, every administration, whether it was a Democratic or Republican administration, had the same foreign policy. And a lot of people don't understand that, the military is the military is the military. Its job is to protect the country. The Joint Chiefs of Staff, you may change them, but it's still the military. And they will tell the president, Mr. President, this is what you have on the table as an option, not what you're thinking over there. They bring the reality to the table. The think tanks, the masterminds of the military. So I think him going into office and seeing what's truly available as an option, concurs with what you're saying, is that, you go in there thinking, well, I'm just going to pull out. Well, then when you get there and they explain to you all the fine details that the media doesn't know about, that nobody knows about, it's not that easy. So, you have to give him credit for doing his job.
Well, let me run this past you. According to polyfacts.com, President Obama, he made 508 promises. He kept 158 of those promises. He compromised on 49. Unfortunately, he broke 54. He's been stalled on 66. And in the works, he has 179, and there are 2 not yet rated. So of 508 promises that he did make, he kept 158. So of that, what are your thoughts in terms of him being prepared or getting these things started for a second term?
You know, when I hear that, to me it just sounds like it just seems so nitpicky. I don't recall any other president ever being having his promises actually tabulated and quantified and then checklist off.
So you think they set the bar higher?
I really do. I think one of the things for certain is that when we talk about President Obama, the elephant is still in the room, and that's the incorporation of race. And how does race and class play a role in this conversation? If nothing else, this Obama presidency has shown me and has demonstrated to other people that it's not issues of just with race, but there's race and class issues as well. And I do believe that in some ways that scrutiny has a lot to do with race. I think a lot of how well he is received or not received with other foreign relations has a lot to do with race. And then that means everyone else now has to take stock or take inventory of their own perceptions.
Sure.
With the stats that you're talking about also, the president doesn't make the laws. He introduces legislation. It's the Congress that approves it or not. Now, he can be as persuasive as he wants, and he can twist arms, but if Congress doesn't want to do it, it's not going to happen. Yeah. So how do we blame the president for all of that? And I think it's too utopic to believe that anybody's going to get everything done. Yeah. I mean, you shoot high and you know that arrow is going to come down a little bit lower. And I think considering the crisis, the times, and the fact that the Democrats did lose their supermajority after the second term tells you that he's having to contend with the 49% I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, and I would say that all presidents are judged by, you know, how they do. Their first 100 days is always a big deal in terms of what you promise and what's accomplished. But what I think this goes back, as I was saying before, to this issue of perception. This is all about perception. People wanted him to be something that he was not. If you look at, even on foreign policy, President Obama and Hillary Clinton had the exact same voting record when it came to the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan. They voted to consistently fund it. They had not voted. I mean, they'd given George Bush basically a blank check when he was in the Senate for the very short time that he was there. That's what he did. But people didn't want to know that. They wanted to make him the liberal champion. They wanted to make him this, and that was never who he was. And so I think what the problem, and I saw this from the day one in that campaign, because I used to volunteer on this campaign when he was running for the Senate. But I saw it in the presidential campaign. People made him who they wanted him to be. They didn't care about the truth, and now they're disappointed with who he is.
Well, they were voting somebody out. Basically, they didn't want any more of that George Bush Republican politics, and they voted. They went out and voted and made sure that was going to continue for another 4 years.
But I think that goes back to Nick's point: is it's not all on him. It's not really all on him. His success. I mean, how many times can you say, okay, everybody, let's work together? I mean, how many times can you try to be that person that's the mediator between the two? It just, to me, it just feels like the Republicans are just simply not cooperating. Their whole objective is to make sure that he's not reelected. And I'm like, dude, that's kind of a horrible way to come at how we're supposed to represent and how we're supposed to stabilize and how we're supposed to fix the government. Sure. I'm going into the conversation simply saying my goal is to get you out.
Well, I did hear a comment, and I'll let you finish, Ted, but I did hear a comment about the Republicans that they would let the ship sink with them on it, just so that they can get rid of the captain.
And I think that speaks volumes about the Republicans, and just like, dude, are you really who you say you are?
Yeah, but
I mean, we shouldn't be surprised by the outcome. I mean, let's be honest. I'm not saying that I'm looking at the TV and I'm hoping for euphoria and now I'm disappointed, but I'm just like, wow, you guys really showed your tails. This has been very interesting.
It has been interesting. Ted, what was your comment you wanted to make?
Well, we've gotten on something. I'm in CM's comment now. I forgot what I was going to say, but I'm all into this whole thing now. But I just think in general, here's what I was going to say. The reality is this speaks to a larger problem in the American political process. If you look at the United States and you compare it to, say, Great Britain has essentially two heads of state, right? They have the prime minister,
right,
And then they have, you know, the British royalty that serves the head of state function, that
But I
sort of
think
thing.
they're
But
figureheads.
here's what I'm saying. In the United States, we have one nationally elected office. One. That's it. That's the president. President's the head of state. He's a commander-in-chief. He is the domestic leader, champion for all these domestic causes, international causes. He's the head of his party at the same time. And there's just too much weight on it. And so there's no one in the world that can fulfill those promises. And I think that you're going to see that disappointment all the way around. We've got to look at the way that we even elect national leaders. It's a shame that and if you think about this, in the Congress, at the end of the day, all the Congress people, the House of Rep and the Senate, they're all responsible to their districts back home. He's the only one that has to have the national interest in mind. Right. And so fundamentally, you're going to have a problem.
Well, Ted, it's interesting. You know, you're talking about the parliamentary system and whether it has a monarch or not. You have the head of state and the head of government. So the prime minister acts as the head of government. Here we have our president acts as head of state and head of government. And usually in a parliamentary system, the prime minister comes out of the parliament. Okay, so he's not elected separately, and that's one of the beauties or one of the differences that our system has compares to when comparing to other countries. It has a stability, but with that stability comes some shortcomings, and you see them every now and then. And I think that this president really has a full plate. People are blaming him for, like I said earlier, I mean, he's introducing legislation. He can't pass the legislation.
He can only do so much.
He can only veto, and they can override him. So what do you do?
And, you know, I often tell people, you know, when I go to vote, I go into the poll thinking selfishly about myself and my concerns and my interests. I mean, that's just the way that I am. And
I don't think you're any different from the other
and
voters.
I'll be honest with you, I'm looking at Obama and I'm going down with my checklist of concerns, and I haven't seen him address any of mine.
Well, I would argue that, okay,
I mean,
what about the Jobs Act? What about the stimulus plan? I mean, these are...
But what I'm saying, what about the mortgage? What about the whole mortgage and the loan remodification? I think that's something that's touching everyone. If he really wanted, if everybody wanted to talk about what are some things that he could and could not do, it would have been nice for him to do a serious address of that. And I think more people would not be so hesitant or more apt to kiss him with one eye open.
But I would argue that he did those things as well. I think that, you know, the problem with all of these issues that Americans have to understand that these issues are bigger than him. If you look at the mortgage crisis, you look at that happened primarily because of the repeal of Glass-Steagall. And so, in the banking regulations that existed, that happened before he got there. And so you saw all of the fallout from that when he got into office. You look at the repeal of PAYGO, which was a government program that basically guaranteed that you would pay for the programs that you were passing. Well, that expired under George W. Bush. So you start to see this culture of spending. So now he gets blamed for all of the, you know, he comes in and he has
he inherited a lot of things.
He inherits this. He has the stimulus plan that this Keynesian model of let's spend. And what you would make the case is that any president in his position, Democrat or Republican, would probably have done many of the same things.
Well, let's think in terms of this last point. Did Michelle Obama hurt his campaign when she said it's okay if he's in office for one term?
No.
No.
That's insignificant.
I mean, how would that hurt his? How would that hurt?
They've taken her. I have a hard time having
twist everything around. Both sides do.
Nick, go ahead and let's roll this into our final comments.
Yeah, you know, American politics, just the two-party system, since we were talking about the parliamentary system, you know, it's just two sides and it's almost like a football mentality. And it goes both ways. I mean, when
it does.
And you know, when Reagan was in power, it was the same thing, and now it's Obama and it's the opposite. And it's just this football mentality that, you know, pointing fingers, twisting things around, editing out what people say and making them look stupid. And, you know, really, it's just too much. And I think that's a big part of the problem, is if we don't get away from that type of thinking and don't have discourse, constructive discourse, we're not going anywhere.
Ted, final comments?
I'm sickened by the ancillary issues that come up with him, whether he's on vacation in Hawaii or whether his wife, what she eats. I mean, it's just so silly. And those are as on top of what Nick said, which I agree with, that coupled with this media culture, you know, as Sarah Palin called it, you know, playing got you. you know, which actually, I mean,
that's what got her.
Quote Sarah Palin to close out. But you know, it's funny because, you know, that, you know, she mentioned it, and of course, you know, she, you know, got the brunt of that, which some of it she deserved. But the reality was, it goes all the way around. That culture is sickening, and people are tired of it. People want real solutions, and they don't want these ancillary, ridiculous, personal conversations. And so I won't listen to anyone who has personal issues with him. Talk about his policies, whether you agree or disagree, that's great. But all the other stuff, they can leave it.
Sam?
Well, I guess the best way to sum it up is to say I think I'm tired of us settling for the whole rant of, when it comes to politicians, you're voting for the lesser of two evils. Not to quote a favorite show of mine, but at the end of the day, you're still voting for evil. Yeah. And that's, I think that's what's the irritation and the rub for me, is I'm tired of having to settle for voting for a lesser evil.
Thank you so much for joining me today on The Professors. I'm Pamela Canamaray. Thank you for watching.